Lender's mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
Should you use that or should you save up to the 20%, I believe it is,
Yep.
for your house deposit?
90% of people fucking use LMI, guys. I've used LMI about 9 times in my life. I'll continue to use it. LMI stands for Lender's Mortgage Insurance. LMI is looked down heavily upon in Australia, which is really sad. But it's literally a tool to fast track your wealth, similar to rent vesting. For those who have a lot of capital already to begin with, like they're already successful business owner, maybe they've got $500,000 cash, or maybe they've got, $1 million of equity in their home, which is a lot of my clients in Sydney and Melbourne. They don't have to do that. However, majority of people, it absolutely makes sense to put in a smaller amount of deposit so that you hold on to more of your money to get to the next property quicker. And the other thing is LMI, it's added onto an entire 30-year mortgage. And once you truly understand inflation, man, inflation will just erode it away anyway. LMI is tax deductible when you buy the property in your personal name, and the property will usually outperform the cost of LMI anyway. So LMI is a beautiful tool that I love to fast track your wealth.
Tax hacks with property.
Tax hacks, I love these. You're just like riveling off right at the moment. Okay, this is how I think about property. And this is, have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad? Cool. Have you read his other book, Cash Flow Quadrant?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is a quote from Robert Kiyosaki's tax advisor, Tom Wheelwright. I read his book and it just blew my mind. He says, taxes are a set of incentives. That hurts a lot of people to hear that. They're like, nah, fuck the government. I don't want to pay taxes. But if you do what the tax code says, for example, when you're a big business owner, they will give you a bunch of tax incentives because they're like, thank you, Mr. Big Business Owner, for creating jobs. Here's a bunch of tax incentives. Hey, Mr. Investor, property investor, thank you for creating roofs or a house, a roof over people's homes. Here's a bunch of tax incentives. So property investors benefit the most when it comes to the tax code. So it is very easy for property investors to make $300,000. I'll give you an example. To make $300,000 across your jobs, business, income from your properties, and pay zero in taxes legally. It's possible. So that's the way that I think about taxes. In the short form, it's just a short-term sacrifice for a long-term game that we benefit from it the most. People come to me thinking about, oh, but what about land tax? Like, screw land tax. It's a really small bill to pay in order to have cash flow. Like, imagine, like, the average person that'll build out a portfolio gets about $100,000 or $100,000 of passive income in usually somewhere between 10 to 15 years, just with starting off with one deposit. $100,000 of passive income. And people sitting there focusing on, oh, but then I might have to pay a land tax bill of $5,000. Who cares? Wouldn't you rather pay the government an extra $5,000 in order to make a passive $100,000 passive? Fuck yes. So I've got one of my mentors who owns 250 properties. His land tax alone is $150,000 a year just in land tax. His cash flow is above $3 million. Who cares? It's just a mindset. It's the cost of doing business.
When buying property, should you buy it for a business owner that has trust, a company set up as a trust? Should you buy the property on your personal name, on the trust?
Okay.
What's the best way to go about it?
I'm going to be careful with this one. And the reason why I tell you is because in the industry, people don't like talking about it because it's actually heavily regulated. And actually, I'm not licensed to talk about trusts. Unfortunately, I'm going to give some context in it before I answer this. Yeah. Unfortunately, in Australia, the only person who's licensed to talk about it is an accountant. But accountant is not a wealth builder. It sucks dick. But everyone's told, go to your accountant, right? And accountants don't typically like trusts because trusts negatively have this negative association with it. But trusts have a huge amount of borrowing capacity benefits, huge amount. So there's a lot of pros to trust and there's just as many cons. So I'm not going to answer, it's not a black and white answer to answer your question. So I'm not going to say yes or no to that. However, more often than not, the benefits of a trust outweigh the cons most of the time. So for most business owners, it would make sense. However, you definitely need to know the pros and cons before looking into it. So it's not a black and white answer. I would never say yay or nay. That's something that I work very deeply on with each of my clients individually because there's a lot of other things that we've got to consider, like where else are you getting your profits from? Are you a sole trader at the moment? Are you a company structure? And then my job is essentially to work with my clients on how do I ask the right questions to my accountant and how do I set the right context of what I'm trying to achieve. Because for most people, what they're trying to achieve is to protect their borrowing capacity, actually, because that's where most people get stuck. And there is a loophole within trust that can help you protect that. But the accountant, who's the one who has to set it up, they usually don't give a rat's ass about your borrowing capacity, do they?
Yeah.
They're there to help you reduce your taxes. So it's a really difficult conversation to work out, oh, who's right? Is it my broker? Is it my coach? Is it is it my accountant? Well, actually, we just got to create the context behind it all. That's it. Yeah. So not black and white answer, but a lot of pros and cons.
Are all your properties under your name?
Good question. No, bit of a balance. If I'll be honest with you, I didn't find out about the benefits of trust because everyone was so scared to talk about it. I didn't find out the benefits until I was property, I think, number 4 or 5. I wish I had known more about it.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of my first properties were bought in my personal name. I wish I'd known about it, but also it is sometimes healthy to have a couple of properties in your personal name. And now, because of the learning of how awesome trusts are, I actually surface my training of that, like the pros and cons. I actually just give that to my clients straight away so that they are informed, so that they can make the decision. I don't want to hold this sort of information back because it's too good to hold back, basically. But I have to be very careful in how I deliver it because of how regulated it is in the industry in Australia.
And just checking, if you had to do everything all over again, would you have like just started buying properties under trust or like
I'll give you the answer. It's like an 80-20 rule.
80-20?
80-20. So I'd say probably for most people, on a personal level, I'd say 80% in a trust, 20% in a personal name. And of the 20%, usually it's the first 1 or 2 properties max, because you don't want to get to a point where, like, if it can protect your borrowing capacity, you don't want to apply it when it's too late. Usually most people find out about it when it's too late. There's ways around it. Like, you can sell off a property, right, and then swap it out and then put it inside a trust, but it triggers this thing called stamp duty all over again, so it doesn't normally make sense. But sometimes I plan that within people's journey, within people's portfolio, to say, okay, you might be stuck at a borrowing capacity right now. Let's work out which property is holding you back. Okay, it's this one. It makes sense to sell off this one, and then we'll replace it, start fresh, and then we'll start buying properties this time inside trust, for example. So it's just a bit of a timing game, and I've got to nurture that in.